I'm Aimee Pruitt.
I'm Lisa Dumas.
I teach Ayurveda and yoga.
I teach yoga. I'm a yoga therapist in training, and I offer transformational coaching. But that's just part of the story.
We're moms, daughters, wives, and friends. We're always learning, and we've both experienced healing by what we teach.
And the intention of this podcast is to offer you our favorite tools from the traditions and sciences that support us as we navigate the realities and stressors of modern life.
Each week, we'll share stories, answer your questions, and talk to others who inspire us.
Welcome to the Radiant Warrior Podcast.
Yoga and Ayurveda to reclaim a courageous heart.
It's finally spring where you are too?
Oh my goodness. Today feels like absolutely day one.
The last couple of days have been gorgeous here in Vancouver. Today, almost like summer, just t-shirt weather for sure.
Oh, it's not that here. It's still like in the 40s or 50s. I would say maybe 50s Fahrenheit.
Yes. We're even different than that, as I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and you're in Ohio. I'm going by Celsius. So if I told you today was 20 degrees, you'd be like, that's not warm. But
that's not warm. No, but the sun,
Celsius, it's like 70.
Oh, yeah. No, the sun was shining and the sky was blue. It's the first time I feel like the sky's been blue here in about 6 months. And I mean, 2 days ago we had snow. So today felt really nice. And the days are getting longer and it just feels so good.
Well, it's apropos then that today we're going to be talking about intentional ways that we can bring in spring, because we're recording this right at spring equinox, the time when light and dark is in balance. And, Ayurveda and yoga have a lot to say about the shifting of the seasons and how moving in time with that can help us to continue on our journey of personal development. So all things spring today.
All things spring. I'm so excited. Oh,
is this a favorite season of yours?
It's definitely up there. Spring and fall are my two favorite seasons. Summer's okay, and winter is not my favorite at all. I don't know why I live in Ohio, but I say this every winter, and I still continue to live here, and I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, I'm getting more sensitive to the cold the older that I get.
Mm-hmm.
What is spring to you?
I just remember it seems to have always brought about a sense of excitement for me or anticipation. It brings joy to me because I really do appreciate the sunlight. I have a really hard time in the winter when it's dark when you leave the house and it's dark when you get home. And so having the sunshine just really warms my heart. And there's just a real shedding for me that occurs, renewal, anticipation of new things, growth, all that seems to occur in the spring. I've never been one to set like New Year's resolutions or make any big changes at the new year, but in spring, I get really inspired to try new things and to grow or learn. So spring is my transformation time.
It feels like we all come out of hibernation. Vancouver, through the winter, it doesn't snow very often, but it's pretty cloudy and it rains, which is why we have such a green city and is why we have such a beautiful spring. But for me, spring is really about some Vancouver memories because this is where I grew up. And for a lot of my adult life, we lived in San Diego, which still has seasons, but they're very subtle. But now living back in an area that has very definite seasons, it brings on these childhood memories of excitement of seeing the new buds and the tulips and the daffodils and the crocuses sprouting. And that's happening right now. And my birthday's in March. It was just my birthday. So it has that level of renewal as well. I agree with you. Spring and my birthday feel a lot more like a new year than January 1st. So I also feel that level of renewal. But there's a lot of reasons from an Ayurvedic perspective that even though our outer world around us is in rejuvenation, that some of us aren't really feeling that way in our bodies.
We could definitely still be in the Ayurvedic season of Kapha, So some people might still be feeling that heavy, damp, cold, lethargic feeling right now, but don't fear. That will change with the right routines and implementing new things. So this is definitely the time to switch things up a little bit.
I'm noticing a lot of coughing in yoga classes still. So we're still
Mhm.
dealing with that chest congestion, the home of kapha.
Mhm.
Yes, I would also suggest that when it comes to your movement in springtime, this is a nice time to think about shedding. This is a nice time to think about coming out of hibernation and thinking about stretching open across the chest and taking deep breaths so you feel your rib cage expand. You're creating space there. And also, literally shaking off the winter. This is something that is really simple that I recommend when we're feeling heavy and that inertia setting in is in the morning. It feels a little silly, but just take a couple of minutes and shake that whole body off, and it's definitely revitalizing.
Invigorating.
What I like about the equinox is it is a time for contemplation. It can be a time that you set aside to get inspired and honor what's going on in our outer world, honor these transition seasons and the transitions that we're making. And so we thought about a couple of questions that we would answer here that might inspire our listeners to also take some time to reflect. We are all about an examined life here. We're all about conscious evolution. So, further than some practices that might help us feel that level of renewal that's going on around us, we have a couple of questions that we've been thinking about that we thought we'd share. The first is, and I'll ask you, Aimee, what seeds did you plant in the fall or in the past year that are feeling like they're growing and sprouting for you now?
I think in the fall, I really tried to honor that season. As I become more immersed in an Ayurvedic lifestyle, I have started to really honor the seasons and what they bring to me. And in the past, I've tried to push through the winter, push through the darkness, push through all of that season, and kept my routine the same and kept my activities the same and the foods I ate and the amount of sleep I was getting and my work schedule. This past fall, I could really feel it catching up to me. I was doing too much. So in the fall, moving in, the fall is Vata season, that air and ether and blowing and swirling and dry and light season. I tried to really honor that with restoration and rest and contemplation and hibernation, like you said, not beating myself up about that, really honoring my energy level. And when I was tired, trying to rest as much as possible. And that doesn't mean I just had this leisurely schedule. I still had things I had to attend to, but I tried to really prioritize rest and sleep and my energy so that I wasn't coming to a state of burnout. I feel that reserve now. I feel like I have built up this energy reserve by resting and hibernating through the winter, that now as we're moving into spring, I feel really energized.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel the effects of kapha like I normally do. Like spring in the past, I could feel that heaviness still. As much as spring excites me, I could still feel that heaviness or that inertia in the past that I don't feel this year quite so much. And I think that's because I was really going with the flow of the seasons and really felt like I had gone into hibernation mode for quite a while. And I feel like I refilled my tank. So planting those seeds in the fall of really honoring the fall, I feel like has set me up to be in a better place now in the spring.
It's so validating when these practices that we've dedicated our life to really end up working the way that they say that they will.
I know.
And intentions are so powerful. When we look back and we think about the plans that we've made or the intentions that we set, oftentimes we will find that we've made movements in those areas because where we place our attention, that's where energy grows.
Mm-hmm.
I planted a couple of seeds as well. that was when I decided that I wanted to jump into a yoga therapy course. So that has been going on through fall, through winter, and now in the spring. And those seeds of wanting some new learning are definitely growing. And those learnings are affecting my teaching and affecting my life and my relationships and the work I do with my clients and really just every aspect of my life, these new understandings from a yoga therapy perspective. And then in my personal life, I did very intentionally plant some seeds around my marriage. We're heading into our 20-year anniversary. That would be 21 years together. And it hasn't always been like daffodils and tulips.
Mm-hmm.
But we put a lot of work into it, and compassion and understanding, and using our relationship as an opportunity to notice what needs to be healed within us. Not that we ever will be completely healed, but we know that whatever might upset us about the other, we know now to ask ourselves, okay, what does this remind me of? And where is this wounding in me? And how can I tend to that? So we've definitely been intentional about our relationship, and we see it as a place of personal healing, and we see it in a very conscious way. But within my heart, even apart from him, I made an intention to create more intimacy there and just make sure that we have more time for true, authentic, close conversations rather than what we can find ourselves in, which is the business of everyday life. We both have a lot going on. We're both entrepreneurs. He's got several things going on, as do I. We're raising a 16-year-old, and we're both really involved in that. And we have a new puppy. I don't know what we're thinking. So there's a lot of the business of life that we tend to talk about, especially during the early days of the week when we feel busiest. It's like we're touching into one another just for a moment or two, and hey, have you done this? And I did this. And has the dog pooped? These.
Right.
So I really set an intention to make time for the more romantic side of our relationship and the more intimate side of our relationship. And I can see how that is paying off. And I can see the ease and the closeness and the contentment and the trust and the real happiness that we're sharing at this time. And, I have no illusions that any state that we find ourselves emotionally or in any relationship is permanent. Everything's impermanent. But in the moment, I'm going to soak it up, and I'm going to celebrate that and enjoy that.
I like how you put it earlier that, that we are living an examined life. And I think in marriage, that can get lost. Even when we think we're living an examined life, like you said, we get lost in the business of the day to day. And coming up on 20 years and to still have that desire to want to connect and want to be your best selves individually and as a couple is really something to cherish. And I think a lot of people could take that advice. I see people around me who have been married for a while and they're really lost in the day to day. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
It's so easy to be. It's not easy to take the time when you're so exhausted at the end of the day and you just really want to put on Shameless on Netflix, and watch 5 episodes of it. Not to say that we don't do that as well, but I do try to, before we turn it on, like turn and face him and feel that connection. If you go for the 5 love languages, my love language is that one-on-one time of real connection. So I know that I need that. And I also know that I can't count on somebody else to provide that for me. Yeah, I can seek that out, and I can request that, and I can create that for myself. You said something that's really important to think about when we think about intentions and planting seeds. I think when we're doing this work or interested in this work, we can always feel like we have more to heal and more to understand. And that may always be true, but it's really nice to look back at how far we've come and to also understand that we are all just doing exactly the best that we can in the moment, and to cultivate a little bit more contentment at where we are. Intentions are great, wanting shifts here and there, more balance here and there. That's what yoga and Ayurveda is all about. But, we also don't want to live in a way where we're searching for what is wrong. It's so nice to take some time and enjoy and celebrate what is good. And that feels like a nice springtime intention, actually, as well. So, our next inquiry that we've been contemplating: what is being renewed for you, Aimee?
It feels to me like what is being renewed is my commitment and devotion to myself. And that might sound weird or self-centered or self-absorbed, but like we said in marriage, how we can get lost in the day-to-day. I feel like over the years, I kind of lost maybe my connection to my dreams or my desires or my inspiration. And I feel that returning. I feel this renewed sense of excitement of what do I want for the rest of my life? And what, just for me, like what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And whether that's my work or how I spend my time or what do I do for fun? And that does include, of course, my husband and my children and my grandchildren. But I feel really excited about my future, not knowing maybe what that looks like, but having a real firm commitment to seeking that out and following my dreams, which may seem a little esoteric, but it's a renewed passion and excitement in me that I haven't felt in a long, long time.
I love to hear that. And I also think that what else can we really control except for what's right for us? And if we're doing what's right for us based on love rather than fear, I do think that that will be good for those around us as well, that will
Mhm.
have a ripple effect.
Yeah. And I can look back, when my children were young and, I was just starting out and building a home and creating, a haven for them and being in a good school district. And, all those things that I was doing was very much directed to the people around me and setting my life up in that way, which is very typical. But at this stage in my life, my children are grown. So now I can kind of return to what do I want and following that and identifying that and, not losing sight of it or disregarding it, but actually following it.
And what have you come up with?
Oh, there's so many things I want to do.
I know I need many more lives.
I know. I keep thinking that, and I feel I don't feel my age, and I really credit yoga and Ayurveda for that. I don't have any problem with my age, but I also feel a lot younger. So that gives me a sense of hope that there's time to do the things that I want to do because I do feel, young in my heart and young in my body. And I really want to pursue yoga and Ayurveda on a much deeper level, whether that means going on a spiritual journey or a sabbatical to dive deep into studying. Late night, I will be on the computer looking at ashrams and, how do you live in an ashram and how long could you stay in an ashram and also bringing all the good things that yoga and Ayurveda has brought into my life, into my community, into those who need it. And does that mean that I open a studio? That is something that's really in the forefront of my mind that I would like to do. I would like to open a place, devoted to yoga and Ayurveda and wellness. And I'll drive around and look at spaces and dream and write business plans. And those are things that are really exciting to me. So we'll see.
I love this. Springtime is a good time to make intentions like that. It sounds very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I trust with part of your pit of nature that you'll make anything happen that you can. When I think about what's being renewed, I too thought about this. And for me, it's my thinking. That is what I'm renewing, and that is what I want to continue to renew. The more I learn about the way of the mind, and the more I learn that so many of our reactions and our actions are based on just patterns that we don't even realize are there. And so often through the day, especially when we're not questioning our mind, we're having thoughts that we've had before, and we're having thoughts that give us opinions and filters and preferences that we might not even really choose anymore, that they may not line up with the lives that we do want to live and that we do want to create. And I'm getting very interested in paying even more attention to my mind. As I've shared before, all of this information came to me when I first found yoga just a little bit over 10 years ago. And so now at this decade mark of doing this work, I'm very interested in how many new thoughts I can create. Having a 16, almost 17-year-old daughter, I have to say has really been teaching me a lot about my mind and a lot about the unconscious shoulds that I carry, because I hear these unsatisfied thoughts in my mind that come unbidden, that tell me, how she should be and how she should be treating her room and her things and feeding herself and studying and da 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 da. Mm-hmm. And this causes me a lot of worry that I would prefer not to think. And this makes me feel, this brings on feelings of control, which are very constricting and uncomfortable in my body. And I know that every single human being is all things. That is a side of me that I would love to balance out a little bit more. And I noticed that side of me once I became a mother. So I've got the awareness of it, but that doesn't mean that those thoughts don't come. So it's been interesting for me to be questioning those lately. Okay, the thoughts that I'm having around how she should treat her room or how she should be with her phone, I know that I know that I have no control over her. She's another human being, and I cannot control her. And so all I can do is change the way that I'm thinking so that I'm not suffering, so that I'm not worrying. And I can even think, well, I should just worry about the way I treat my things, and I should worry about my own relationship with my phone. And that brings it back to me, which, just like you said, when you were sharing about what is renewing for you, that's all we have a say over, is our own side of the street. And it starts with what we think. So these days, I'm all about noticing how many new thoughts I can think, because I too am creating and have a lot of visions for where I'll be in the second part of life as Grace heads off to university and Cliff and I embark on whatever life looks like then. And we do have some shared visions, and I do have a lot of goals for those times when I have more time and more emotional space freed up to be creative and to be inspired. And that new life is going to take new thinking. So I'm all about renewing my thoughts right now.
Mm-hmm. Opportunities all day long.
And that also brings me back to the idea of balance. And spring isn't just about renewal and coming out of hibernation, but because it was just the spring equinox this past Wednesday, this is also a time to consider balance. This is also an area where we can be hard on ourselves, because it is a challenge to feel that anything is in balance in this modern world, and with all of the distractions that we have and with how busy we all are. So let's talk a little bit about where we are looking for balance in our own lives. Aimee, how about you?
Well, balance for me is ever elusive. It's something that I'm always striving for and always feel like I could be improving upon. Balance, especially in my schedule. I overschedule and I overdo and I overcommit, and being very conscious of not doing that or attempting to not do that is a constant struggle for me. I continue to seek balance in that area. I'm very compassionate with myself that this will probably be my lifelong work. Like you had mentioned, I have a very pitta brain, and I want to accomplish and do and achieve and seek and grow and build. And the flip side of that is I can burn out. And so that is a constant source of seeking balance in that area for me. And I still feel that now. I'm still looking for that balance there, but I'm getting better at it.
This makes me think of this entire concept that is very interesting and a little esoteric that comes from the yoga tradition, how yoga sees a balance between masculine and feminine. And when we say those terms, it has nothing to do with gender identity. It has nothing to do with men and women. It's about these symbolic archetypal energies that we contain all of them. And there are some that the wisdom traditions describe more as being masculine tendencies and some being more in the feminine. And I do not claim to be an expert in this field at all, but I've been doing a lot of research lately, and a lot of different conversations and podcasts and books have been coming my way about this idea of reclaiming the feminine in our lives, and about how, because it's just sort of in our collective unconscious that we live in a patriarchal society, that many of us women have been trained to look down upon feminine principles like rest and receptivity and trust in favor of striving and achieving and doing, because that is what gets affirmation in this kind of world. And for both of us in our family of origins, that's what got affirmation and acknowledgement and love, is when there was succeeding happening. So we're wired to just want to continue to succeed. But as women, we all come to this when our striving and achieving and efficiency and productivity becomes out of balance, when that's all that we're thinking about. And that is very me. I'm learning a lot about my pitta nature actually in this yoga therapy course. I always thought that it was the airy vata that was keeping my mind very busy. But the more I learn, I understand that it is the pitta mind. Anytime there's a spare moment in my mind or a spare moment in my life or my calendar, I want to fill it with productivity. I want to fill it with efficiency. And this is a place where I am intending to come back into balance, because I can see how I'm passing that along to my daughter. And I can see where I have these beliefs that if I'm not achieving, if I'm not being productive, then I'm lazy. And how lazy is like this dirty word where, and there's a lot of teachers right now, and there's a lot of memes, and there's a lot in our culture right now about resting and slowing down. But I think it's still very hard for us to give ourselves permission for that, because we don't see it as being worthy. We see it as being a waste or indulging, the self-care as indulging, when in fact it's essential. If it's our true feminine nature, and again, not talking about gender roles, not talking necessarily about being women, but we are women. Mm-hmm. And we are different from men in many different ways. And we are fed by connection, and we are fed by noticing and receiving pleasure, and by allowing ourselves softness and gratitude, and by receiving and by receiving support and help and acknowledgement. These are all things that help to fill our cup, but it's important to make space for that. So I'm just kind of working this out in my mind. This is something that I've been thinking a lot about, especially about how much value I place on efficiency and productivity. And yes, that gets us places, that gets things done. And at the end of a productive day, we've been trained to feel really good about that day. But the balance for me at this time of year is going to think about, in the midst of efficiency, how can I take these small moments to get outside, to appreciate what's now as opposed to what I'm going to accomplish later. More present-centered thinking, to appreciate the small little moments of beauty, to appreciate the love around me, what I can enjoy around me, to take more time to cultivate contentment. Because this achieving and being productive, it feels like the opposite of content and acceptance with what is. So I'm thinking about more of that these days.
Doing things just for the sheer enjoyment of the activity and not the outcome or the achievement.
Yeah, and less control. And I did learn on that retreat that I went on, that I spoke about a few podcasts ago, that was based on this principle of reigniting receptivity and reigniting these feminine principles. And I think we all feel this in our body when we succumb to too much control, when our mind is full of what our kids should be doing, what they should be eating, what we should be eating, what we should be saying, how much we should be working, how much we should be sleeping, how much, all the shoulds, when we're attempting to just control everything around us. And often that comes from a place of fear. I can understand why we want to feel like we're in control, because we're really in control of so little. So I understand it. But too much of that does bring us into that overwhelm and burnout. And then we absolutely fall into exhaustion and numbing, because it's just too far gone. And that's why it's important to embrace something. It doesn't have to be yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, although we would recommend that, but to embrace something that allows you to drop back into the here and now, and to be able to take the time to look around and feel what's going right, really soak up what's going right.
It is so fleeting. When I look back on raising my daughters and their childhood, and the days are long and the years are short, and really soaking up the present moment. If I could go back and just soak up every moment, oh my God, what I would give to do that.
It may sound morbid, but my family's away right now. My husband and my daughter are away, and they went away, and I walked into my daughter's room, and just the level of, and I just helped her clean it like a couple of days before. And I could feel my mind going into so much frustration, and I did my best to meet it with compassion. I was just the same, and this just isn't the way her brain is working right now. And I brought it over to my side of the street as well. And ultimately, what ended up helping me to soften is I did have the thought, well, what if something were to happen? And I would never forgive myself for having so many thoughts be about what she should be doing. So that does help me actually to think about nobody is guaranteed a tomorrow. And even though it's scary to think about and maybe morbid to think about, it actually helps me bring everything into perspective and have one of those new thoughts that I was talking about that's much more compassionate and much more loving and coming from a more grateful place.
Definitely. Working in the emergency room for all those years, I was reminded of that quite frequently, that nobody is promised any time. And the morbid things that I did see were gifts, in a sense, of being grateful for the time that we have or have had with people. And so I get it. I get what you're talking about.
Who knew that we'd have such a conversation just because it's a new season? But it's not just about renewal. The other side of the coin of renewal is destruction. And that's what we're always in, that cycle of rebuilding and releasing. So spring intentions.
Tell me yours.
More love, more love, more love.
I love that.
It's maybe sounds a little bit cheesy, but when I think about balance, I just think that anytime we are to bring a little bit more love into our thinking, into our perspective, into the places that trouble us, into our worries, into our relationships, that don't you feel that just immediately can bring us back into balance? That's the practice. And I think about something that I read in a book called Food, Women, and God by Janine Roth. and it stuck out to me and I'll think about it forever. And she was talking about when it comes to this addiction to pleasure that so many of us have. And I think we're going to talk about that on the next podcast a little bit. She was talking about that when she asked this question, but I apply this question to almost everything. And the question is, if love had a voice, what would it say right now? It helps me to take care of myself. It helps me to answer the inner rebel that says, you deserve to have this or that, even though I know it won't make me feel great in the morning. It helps me in all of my relationships. It helps me if I'm in my head about maybe what somebody is thinking. It helps me if I'm not feeling good enough in any of my roles. If I say, okay, well, if love had a voice, what would love say? I can always be kinder to myself from that place.
Mm-hmm.
I was teaching a class the other day on this topic, on the topic of spring equinox, on the topic of balance, and also on the topic of the color green, because it was just St. Patrick's Day. And I think many of us relate the color bright spring green to spring. And that color, from a yogic perspective, is related to this symbolic, energetic heart space, one of the chakras, the heart center, if you will. And that might feel really theoretical to some of our listeners, but in yoga, this symbolic place is where we can think about the qualities of the heart kind of energetically residing. And these qualities are in all of us and they can be cultivated. And these qualities are kindness and compassion and full acceptance and receptivity, and of course love, and not just love for other people, because a lot of times it's easier to love other people than it is to ourselves, but to clear enough space there to offer ourselves love too. That's when it came to me when I was teaching that class, that the color green is related to the heart. And anytime we move towards the heart and away from the energy of fear, away from the energy of shame, we do just immediately come back into balance. And the answers are usually from that kinder, softer place than the place of pushing ourselves to do better. That's my spring intention, more love in relationships. I think I'm specifically thinking about my relationship with my daughter, reminding myself I have a few practices. I love the loving kindness meditation, spending more time asking myself, what would love say? That's my intention for this season.
I think mine is more play. I get lost in the doing and the making and building, like I said, and to intentionally make space for play, unstructured play that doesn't have a goal, just to enjoy myself and let myself off the hook, not be looking for the next achievement all the time. I can't promise that will happen as often as is probably good for me, but that's my intention, is to create space for more play.
I think intentions are powerful, especially the way that you and I have treated intentions when we haven't just said them and forgotten about them, but we've used them for a little bit of a North Star in the spring. Mm-hmm. And if you allow your mind to continue to go back to that each day, I could definitely imagine it doesn't have to be an extreme moment of play. You don't have to run outside and do cartwheels or anything.
No.
I think we could be creative, just like adding a little bit more love or gratitude to the day. I think we can be creative about tiny little touchstones through the day that don't take a bunch of time, but they make a big difference. Mm-hmm. Like, what could be a small playful thing that you could do in the regular workday?
So I was thinking about this idea of play, and, I work in a serious environment. I work in the hospital. I work in the cardiology department. I round with the physician. So we run all over the hospital. The physician that I'm with this week is more fun. One part of the hospital has 8 stories, and we were kind of kidding each other about taking the elevator or taking the stairs or and I said, let's just do it. And so we were running up the stairs and we were both dying by the time we got to the 8th floor. Like, we were like crawling. My legs burned so bad and we were so out of breath, but it was playful in the middle of our day, to kind of egg each other on and make fun of each other and not take ourselves so seriously. And
Well, that reminds me of something that two kids would do just innately. They would
right,
just start racing up the stairs. Let's run.
right. And so then it became a thing. Every time we would go to the next patient, we would run up and down the stairs. And that also reminds me of spring. We're finally out and moving and running. And, I feel like we've been released at recess at school. Like we finally get to play outside. And even though it was built into my workday, running up and down the stairs was playful. By the time we got to our destination, we couldn't talk. We were so out of breath. And which, for a doctor and a nurse, we thought probably wasn't the best look because we're supposed to be, promoting health and wellness, and we can't catch our breath either. But it was fun. So just creating moments like that of play. And I encountered somebody who wasn't in a great mood and was a little snappy. And I had this vision of Wonder Woman. She has her wristbands that deflect bullets.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'm like Wonder Woman, deflecting all your negative energy. And then I sent her a meme that had that same Wonder Woman deflecting deflecting all the bad vibes. So
how did she take that? Playfully?
Yeah, she laughed.
Good. Oh, I love to hear this. Your intentions are already coming true.
Yeah, silly.
To close, do we have any other spring tips from a yoga and Ayurvedic perspective that we could pass along before we go?
I think, as we transition from winter to spring and this idea of shedding and growth and creating new life and moving from one season to the next, for me, especially movement is very powerful. So any movement, like getting out and moving my body, walking, doing more vigorous yoga instead of now moving away from the restorative yoga and more into a heat building yoga is very beneficial to me. Not to say like a hot yoga, but just something that moves the body a little more, creates a little more heat in the body. This idea of tapas, bringing heat to purify is a really good touchstone for me at this time of year as the weather changes, also noticing that I need more of that heat as well. Another thing for me is spending time outside. I know for myself, and I don't know if others can relate, but we live in a world where you maybe don't spend a lot of time outside. We go from our house to our car to our place of work or to school and back to the car and back home. I know your city is very pedestrian friendly, and I know you ride your bike a lot, but where I live, people don't spend as much time outside, I think, as they could. So for me, spending as much time as I can outside really helps also to build that heat and connect with the sun and watch what's happening outside with nature. I know where I live, we definitely don't spend enough time outside.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. What comes to mind about this city is when the sun is out, it's like everybody is out. And we have very bright, sunny springs and summers. So you're right. It is a city that is created for people to be outside. There's so many bike paths. It's a great city to get around. That would be number one for me too. At this time of year, it is a joy to be outside and notice and look around at everything that is renewing and think about what's renewing in you.
Connecting to nature gives us so many clues.
That's so true. That's the beautiful part of Ayurveda, how it helps to connect you to nature. And what about, speaking of Ayurveda, what about food? Does food change at all when we shift into spring?
Yeah, so the same things, maybe lightening up what you're eating. And, the foods don't have to be as heavy now. We can counteract that feeling of heaviness or dampness with foods that are a little bit drier or lighter, such as like salads, bringing back salads into your diet, where salads may have not felt really nourishing in the fall or the winter.
Okay, well, enjoy your weather.
Yes. And the sun.
And how light it is in the evening. We're closing this recording at 5 p.m. where we are, and there's still so much sunshine to be had and a beautiful sunset to experience. So I'm going to head out with our puppy and enjoy it now.
All right. Well, you enjoy.
You too. Love you.
Love you. See you later.
Thank you for listening to the Radiant Warrior podcast. If you found it valuable, please leave us a positive review to help others find it.
And please check out the Radiant Warrior podcast on Instagram and Facebook to leave us your questions and find out where you can come and practice with us next.